Israel's crimes can no longer be ignored. Day after day, Gaza is drenched in blood. Civilian homes flattened, children buried under rubble, hospitals targeted with precision bombs, all orchestrated by the Israeli military without the slightest sense of humanity. These are not accidents, not mistakes of war. This is deliberate slaughter. And yet, Israel dares to justify it before the world, shamelessly portraying themselves as victims. But something is shifting. For the first time in decades, the arrogance of Tel Aviv is being met with resistance not only from the Arab world, but from global powers. In recent weeks, Beijing has stepped into the spotlight, issuing a stern warning that Israel's war crimes will not go unanswered. China, with its rising military and economic influence, has made it clear the blood of Gaza cannot be silenced by propaganda. Meanwhile, Iran strengthens its position in the region, fueling support for Palestinian resistance and warning that patience is running out. Russia, watching closely, signals its disapproval, while even voices within America, yes, even Donald Trump, have criticized Israel's actions. What was once blind international support is now slowly cracking, leaving Israel isolated. The world is watching. Israel's brutality is no longer hidden behind Western media filters. And with China stepping into the confrontation, the balance of power may be shifting in a way Tel Aviv never expected. Israel's arrogance is now colliding with a force far larger than it ever imagined, the rising shadow of China. For years, Beijing has maintained a calculated silence in the Middle East, focusing instead on trade, technology, and its Belt and Road Initiative. But that silence has ended. In an unprecedented move, China has openly condemned Israel's military aggression, labeling it as a direct violation of international law and human rights. This is not mere rhetoric. Chinese warships have increased their presence in the Mediterranean. Military drills with Russia in nearby waters are no coincidence. Beijing is sending a clear message. The days when Tel Aviv could massacre Palestinians without consequence are over. And Israel knows it. Panic within the Israeli government is evident, as even their strongest allies begin to hesitate. Let us be clear, this is not just about Gaza. For China, it is about reshaping the world order. It is about breaking the monopoly of Western power, exposing Washington's double standards, and positioning itself as the defender of oppressed nations. By confronting Israel, Beijing is directly confronting American hypocrisy. Washington claims to champion democracy, yet it funds Israel's bombs that kill innocent children. And what of Israel's response? Instead of reflection, Tel Aviv lashes out with propaganda, painting China as an opportunistic intruder. But the truth is undeniable. Israel's war crimes have become too grotesque to defend. Even within the United Nations, support for Israel grows weaker by the day, while China's voice grows louder. Make no mistake, this is a turning point. The clash is no longer between Israel and Gaza. It is becoming a confrontation between Israel and the emerging axis of global power. And in this new battlefield of diplomacy and military posturing, Israel finds itself dangerously alone. Israel's nightmare deepens. As China sharpens its stance, another storm brews from Tehran. Iran, long demonized by Israel and its Western backers, is now seizing this historic moment. The Islamic Republic has openly declared that its patience has run out. Military officials in Tehran have confirmed that ballistic missile units and drone arsenals are on full alert, ready to strike at Israel and any American base that dares to interfere. For years, Israel mocked Iran as isolated, weak, and incapable of real retaliation. But today, those words ring hollow. Iran's military technology has evolved. Hypersonic missiles, long-range drones, and underground launch systems now pose a direct threat to Israeli cities. And unlike Israel's bombardment of Gaza, Iran's potential strikes would not be against defenseless civilians, but against military and strategic targets that Tel Aviv depends on. What terrifies Israel most is not only Iran's arsenal, but its alliances. China and Russia, both strategic partners of Tehran, have signaled diplomatic and military backing. This is no longer the Israel of 20 years ago, bullying its neighbors without consequence. Now, every act of aggression risks igniting a regional inferno that Israel may not survive. Inside Israel itself, fear is spreading. Citizens once confident in the so-called Iron Dome now whisper doubts. Can this shield really withstand a coordinated strike from Iran's advanced systems? The Israeli government insists it can, But leaks from military insiders suggest otherwise. Panic is brewing, and the illusion of invincibility is crumbling before the eyes of the world. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Palestinians watch closely. For decades, they stood alone, facing bombs, tanks, and blockades. But now, the tide is shifting. The oppressed are no longer voiceless. Iran, with China and Russia behind it, is shifting the balance of power. And for Israel, the writing on the wall is clear. Its reckless brutality has summoned enemies it cannot easily silence. Israel now faces the consequences of its arrogance. Its unrelenting massacre of civilians in Gaza, its total disregard for international law, and its endless defiance of global condemnation have not gone unnoticed. For decades, Israel enjoyed impunity, protected by Washington's veto in the United Nations and armed with billions in US aid. But today, that shield is cracking. The world is no longer willing to stay silent. Across Europe, protests flood the streets. In London, Paris, Berlin, and Madrid, millions march with Palestinian flags, demanding an end to Israel's crimes. Even governments that once defended Israel are now forced to distance themselves under pressure from their own people. The old narrative, that Israel is a victim defending itself, no longer convinces anyone. The truth is visible in every image. Destroyed hospitals, lifeless children, desperate families fleeing rubble. Israel's lies collapse under the weight of undeniable evidence. At the same time, Arab nations, once fragmented and hesitant, are speaking with stronger voices. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, countries that previously cooperated with Israel in secret, now issue warnings that continued aggression could spark uncontrollable escalation. The so-called normalization agreements Israel boasted about are turning to ashes. The betrayal of Palestine is no longer tolerated. Meanwhile, the United States finds itself trapped. On one hand, it must defend its closest ally. On the other, it risks global isolation. Every bomb Israel drops with American weapons fuels hatred toward Washington. Across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, the image of the U.S. as a champion of democracy is collapsing. Instead, it is seen as the sponsor of bloodshed. The Biden administration now faces international outrage and domestic division. Israel thought it could act with impunity forever. But the walls are closing in. Global pressure, regional opposition, and rising resistance are painting Israel into a corner. Its crimes are no longer hidden, they are broadcast in real time. And the world is watching. The escalation is no longer contained to Gaza. Israel's actions are now igniting flames across the Middle East. Hezbollah in Lebanon has intensified its attacks on northern Israeli positions, sending rockets across the border almost daily. Israel responds with airstrikes, but every strike only deepens the crisis. The northern front is opening, stretching Israeli defenses thin. For the first time in years, the threat of a full-scale multi-front war looms over Tel Aviv. In Iraq and Syria, militias aligned with Iran have also stepped up operations. Drone strikes and rocket attacks target American bases, sending a clear message: support for Israel will come at a price. Washington cannot ignore this widening battlefield. Its forces across the region are now on high alert, bracing for retaliation that could spiral beyond control. And then, there is Iran. For decades, Tehran has been the center of resistance against Israel. Today, Iran declares openly that the patience of the region has reached its breaking point. Iranian officials warn that if Israel continues its massacre, retaliation will be unavoidable. Whether through direct military involvement or through its network of allies, Hezbollah, militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, Iran is signaling that Israel's impunity is over. Inside Israel itself, fear is spreading. Sirens wail daily, shelters fill with civilians, and uncertainty grips the population. What Netanyahu once claimed was defense has turned into chaos. His reckless policies have not secured Israel but have pushed it closer to regional war. Even within Israel's own political sphere, divisions are deepening. Protests against Netanyahu surge once again, accusing him of dragging the nation into disaster. Make no mistake, this is not just about Gaza anymore. This is about the stability of the entire Middle East. Every bomb, every missile, every act of defiance adds fuel to a fire that could engulf the region. And at the center of it all stands Israel, arrogant, isolated, and increasingly vulnerable. The humanitarian cost is now unbearable. Gaza lies in ruins, its hospitals bombed, its schools flattened, its neighborhoods reduced to rubble. Israel insists it is targeting terrorists, but the world sees the truth. The bodies of children pulled from beneath collapsed concrete, mothers screaming in despair, fathers carrying the lifeless remains of their families. This is not self-defense. This is collective punishment on an entire population. International organizations are raising alarm. The United Nations warns of imminent famine, with food supplies cut off and clean water nearly impossible to access. Aid convoys are blocked at the borders, and when trucks finally enter, many are struck by Israeli fire before reaching those in desperate need. Doctors Without Borders report surgeries being performed without anesthesia, as medical stocks are depleted. Gaza's health system has collapsed under the weight of relentless bombing. World leaders, once silent, are now forced to speak. Even Israel's allies cannot ignore the scale of destruction. Protests have erupted in London, Paris, Washington, and Jakarta. Millions demanding an end to Israel's crimes. Yet Netanyahu doubles down, vowing to continue until Hamas is eliminated, no matter the cost in civilian lives. His arrogance fuels global outrage. But here lies Israel's fatal miscalculation. Every civilian killed only strengthens resistance. Every home destroyed deepens the anger of a generation that will never forget. Gaza's rubble is not just debris, it is the seedbed of unyielding defiance. Israel, in its cruelty, is forging the very opposition it claims to fight. The evidence is undeniable. This is not a war on Hamas. This is a war on humanity itself. And the world is watching, recording, remembering. History will not absolve those who enable this slaughter. The crimes committed in Gaza today will echo for generations. Israel's aggression has now ignited a broader geopolitical storm. The Middle East is on the edge of eruption. Hezbollah in Lebanon has intensified its strikes, hitting northern Israel with unprecedented firepower. In Iraq and Syria, resistance groups aligned with Iran are launching coordinated drone and missile attacks. And from Yemen, the Houthis continue to target Red Sea shipping lanes, disrupting global trade in open defiance of Israel and its allies. Tel Aviv hoped that its military might would silence opposition, but the opposite has happened. The so-called Iron Wall of Israeli security is cracking under regional pressure. Each new atrocity committed in Gaza becomes fuel for wider resistance. Israel finds itself surrounded not only by rage, but by forces ready to act. Meanwhile, Iran steps forward more boldly than ever. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has declared that the era of unchecked Israeli brutality is over. Tehran's message is clear: if the genocide in Gaza continues, Israel will face direct retaliation. Intelligence reports suggest Iran has placed its ballistic missile forces on high alert. American warships have rushed to the Mediterranean, but Washington knows it cannot contain this fire forever. Inside Israel itself, fear grows. Citizens flee border towns, the economy falters, and Netanyahu's government faces mounting dissent. Yet the Prime Minister clings to power, convinced that endless bombing will secure his legacy. But his brutality has united Israel's enemies into a single, relentless front. This is no longer just about Gaza. It is about the future of the entire region. Israel's crimes have opened the door to a war that could engulf the Middle East, drawing in world powers, collapsing economies, and destabilizing global order. The question now is not if the storm will break, but how far it will spread. The world watches in shock as Israel's brutality in Gaza has pushed the Middle East to the brink of an uncontrollable firestorm. What began as indiscriminate bombings against defenseless civilians has evolved into a full-scale regional confrontation. Every new attack deepens global outrage.